My name is Megan, and at 35, I never expected my own mother to shatter my daughter's heart with a single sentence. When Madison proudly showed her science fair medal, my mom glanced at it dismissively before saying those words that changed everything. "We wish Bella's kids were our only grandkids." The room froze. My 8-year-old daughter's face crumpled before she ran away sobbing. I didn't cry, I calculated. And 3 days later, my parents' perfectly curated lives began unraveling in ways they never saw coming. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from. Hit that subscribe button and get comfortable. This story about standing up for your child might be exactly what you need to hear today. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, I always lived in the shadow of my older sister, Bella. She was 3 years my senior and the blueprint for perfection in our family. She was a straight A student, prom queen, and a college scholarship recipient. She hit every milestone our parents valued with precision. Our childhood home in Lexington was comfortable. It was nestled in a neighborhood where appearances mattered. My dad worked as a financial advisor. My mom taught piano to the neighborhood children. From the outside, we had the picture, perfect middle-class American life. We had family vacations to Cape Cod each summer, Christmas photos in matching sweaters, and Sunday dinners where conversations centered on achievements and social connections. The favoritism wasn't obvious at first. It showed up in subtle ways. Bella's artwork was displayed proudly on the refrigerator, while mine was tucked away in drawers. Her sports trophies lined the mantel, while my debate team certificates were mentioned with quick, obligatory pride. Mom spent hours helping Bella prepare for recitals. I was expected to figure things out on my own because I was naturally smart. By high school, the pattern was set. When Bella was accepted to Boston College, my parents threw an elaborate party with extended family and neighbors. My acceptance to UMass received a nice dinner at our favorite restaurant. The difference was subtle enough that complaining would have made me sound petty. But it was significant enough that the message was clear. Bella's accomplishments simply mattered more. Bella followed the script perfectly. She met Thomas, her finance major boyfriend, in her junior year. They married after graduation in an elegant ceremony that drained my parents' savings, but was deemed worth every penny. They bought a home in Brookline, close enough for Sunday visits but in a zip code that impressed my parents' friends. Within 2 years, they had twins, Sophia and Jackson, who became the center of my parents' universe. My path was very different. After college, I pursued my passion for teaching. I accepted a job at an elementary school in a working-class neighborhood. My parents questioned why I didn't apply to better schools in wealthier districts. Then, at 26, I met Daniel, an aspiring musician with warm eyes and grand dreams. Our whirlwind romance resulted in an unexpected pregnancy. When I told him, he panicked and disappeared. He left me to face parenthood alone. My parents' disappointment was obvious. My mom cried, asking where she had gone wrong. My dad calculated the financial burden and offered practical but emotionless support. Meanwhile, Bella called with sympathy that thinly veiled her judgment. The contrast between our situations couldn't have been sharper. Her planned, celebrated motherhood versus my chaotic, shameful circumstance. But everything changed when Madison was born. Holding my daughter for the first time, I felt a fierce love and protectiveness that overshadowed any shame or regret. I promised her that night that she would never feel second best the way I had for most of my life. The early years were hard. I returned to teaching with a 3-month-old, juggling lesson plans and midnight feedings. My apartment was small but warm, filled with books and homemade art, rather than expensive furniture. I managed by budgeting carefully, accepting hand-me-downs from colleagues with older children, and learning to silence the voice in my head that compared our life to Bella's. My parents visited occasionally. They brought practical gifts and offered to babysit with a sense of obligation rather than joy. Madison was sweet and smart, with curious eyes and a laugh that could light up a room, but they seemed unable to see past the circumstances of her birth. Meanwhile, Bella's twins were showered with attention. My parents attended every soccer game, school concert, and award ceremony. They took the twins for weekend sleepovers, planned special outings to museums and amusement parks, and spoke about them constantly. Sophia is reading 2 grade levels ahead. Mom would announce during our calls. Jackson has such natural athletic ability. Dad would comment, showing me videos of ordinary ball games as if they were Olympic trials. Madison noticed the difference by age 4. After a joint birthday celebration, where the twins received tablets and Madison got educational books, she asked me in the car, "Why do Grandma and Grandpa love Sophia and Jackson more?" I explained that love wasn't measured by gifts, that different people show affection in different ways. But the question haunted me. I tried building bridges. I sent my parents regular updates about Madison's achievements. I coordinated visits when Madison had performances or special events, giving my parents easy opportunities to be involved. I coached Madison to make special cards and crafts for them. I never spoke negatively about them in front of her, even when their behavior stung. For 8 years, I maintained this delicate balance, hoping that eventually, my parents would see the wonderful person Madison was becoming. I convinced myself that their favoritism was unconscious, that if Madison just kept being her amazing self, they would realize what they were missing. I was wrong. It would take one devastating moment to finally accept that painful truth. Spring arrived in Boston with its usual unpredictability. It was warm sunshine one day, and chilly rain the next. Madison's third grade class was deep in preparation for the annual science fair. My daughter had chosen to explore how different types of music affect plant growth. For 6 weeks, she diligently tended to our little seedlings. She played classical music for one group, rock for another, and kept a third in silence. Every morning before school and every evening before bed, Madison recorded measurements and observations in her journal. She created graphs showing the growth rates and developed thoughtful conclusions about her findings. As her teacher, I maintained a professional distance at school. But at home, I was the proud mom watching my daughter embrace the scientific process with such dedication. When Madison won a gold medal at the school science fair, qualifying her for the district competition, I immediately called my parents. "That's nice, dear," my mom said. Her tone suggested this was minor news compared to Jackson's recent selection for a traveling soccer team. Still, Madison was so excited about her achievement that I suggested we bring her medal to the upcoming monthly family dinner at my parents' house. "Can I wear my medal to show Grandma and Grandpa?" Madison asked at least 10 times in the days leading up to the dinner. I helped her polish it until it gleamed. We rehearsed how she might explain her experiment if they asked questions. "They're going to be so proud," I assured her, though a knot formed in my stomach. My parents had missed Madison's school science fair, claiming a scheduling conflict. I later saw Facebook photos of them at one of Jackson's soccer games that same afternoon. On the drive to my parents' suburban home, Madison chattered about her project. Her medal was tucked safely in her small purse. "Do you think Grandpa will let me show him my journal?" I drew all the plants really carefully. Her hope was so strong, and it made my chest tight with anxiety. We arrived to find Bella's family already there. The twins were dominating the living room with tales of their recent achievements. Jackson had scored 2 goals in his latest soccer match. Sophia had been selected for a regional spelling bee. "There are my star athletes." Dad greeted the twins with enthusiastic hugs, while Mom fussed over Sophia's new haircut. Madison stood quietly beside me, waiting for her turn to be acknowledged. "Hello, Madison," Mom finally said, offering a quick pat on the shoulder. "You've grown since we last saw you." It had been only 3 weeks since our last visit. Throughout the afternoon, every conversation circled back to the twins. Jackson's coach had apparently said he had a natural talent, unlike anything he had seen in years. Sophia had been asked to read her essay aloud to the entire 4th grade. My parents listened to these stories with intense attention, asking follow-up questions and exclaiming over photos on Bella's phone. Madison tried 3 times to mention her science project. The first attempt was interrupted by the arrival of appetizers. The second was talked over as Mom suddenly remembered to show Bella a new necklace she had purchased. The third ended with Dad patting Madison's head and saying, "That's nice, sweetie." Before turning back to Jackson's soccer schedule, I watched my daughter's shoulders slump a little more with each dismissal. The familiar scenario was playing out again. But this time, Madison had come with such high hopes that the disappointment seemed sharper. Dinner was served precisely at 6, as always. It was Mom's pot roast with roasted potatoes and glazed carrots, arranged perfectly on the china that only came out for family gatherings. The twins sat on either side of my father, while Madison and I were placed at the far end, beside Bella's husband. Thomas. Pass the salt, would you, Megan? Mom called down the table. And make sure Madison uses her napkin properly. Meanwhile, when Jackson spilled his water glass, Grandma quickly soothed. Accidents happen, sweetheart, and cleaned it up without a word of correction. Thomas, who was usually absorbed in work emails during these gatherings, noticed Madison's quietness. How's school going, Madison? He asked in a rare moment of attentiveness. Madison brightened instantly. I won a gold medal in the science fair, she said, reaching for her purse to retrieve her prize. Did you? That's impressive, Thomas replied. For a brief moment, the conversation at our end of the table focused on Madison. She carefully took out her medal and held it up. The golden disc caught the light from the dining room chandelier, momentarily drawing everyone's attention. What was your project about? Thomas continued, and Madison launched into an explanation of her experiment, her voice growing more animated with each sentence. I noticed my mother's expression shift from surprise at the interruption to mild annoyance, as Madison's explanation extended beyond a few sentences. Dad glanced at his watch. The twins, unused to not being the center of attention, began to fidget. Speaking of accomplishments, Mom interjected before Madison could finish. Jackson has been selected for a special training camp this summer. Only 10 boys in the state were chosen. And just like that, the moment was gone. Madison's medal was still in her hand. But no one was looking at it anymore. Her explanation hung unfinished in the air, as the conversation swiftly returned to familiar territory. I caught Bella's eye across the table, silently pleading for her to help redirect the conversation, to give Madison just a minute more. Bella gave a small shrug as if to say, you know how they are. As dessert was served. Homemade apple pie, the twins' favorite. The tension in my chest had grown to a dull ache. Madison had put her medal away, and was picking at her pie in silence. The breaking point came when Mom brought out a special second dessert, chocolate mousse cups, that she had made specifically for the twins because they had earned a special treat for their recent achievements. There was enough for the adults, too, but Madison received none because, we have to watch your sugar intake, dear. Madison looked at her empty place setting while everyone else received the special dessert. Then, in a small voice that somehow carried across the entire table, she asked the question that had been building for years. Grandma, why don't you and Grandpa love me as much as Sophia and Jackson? The dining room fell silent. Forks paused midway to mouths. The grandfather clock in the hallway suddenly seemed deafening in its persistent ticking. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably, while Thomas became intensely interested in his dessert. Bella's face turned red, and the twins looked confused by the sudden tension. My mother's expression shifted from shock to indignation. Her spine straightened as she placed her napkin beside her plate with deliberate precision. What a thing to say, she replied, her voice carrying that special tone of wounded dignity she had perfected over decades. Of course, we love all our grandchildren. Madison, emboldened perhaps by having finally asked the question that had lingered unspoken for so long, persisted. But you never come to my school events. You forgot my birthday last year until Mom reminded you. You always give Sophia and Jackson bigger presents. You never ask about my friends or what books I'm reading. Each observation landed like a small stone. Simple truths that were impossible to deflect. My heart swelled with pride at my daughter's articulate expression of feelings I had tried to protect her from acknowledging. Dad attempted damage control. Now, Madison, that's not entirely fair. We're very busy people, and the twins are closer. My mother interrupted, her patience visibly fraying. It's easier to attend their events. Plus, they're involved in so many important activities. My science fair was important, Madison said quietly, her hand moving protectively to her purse where her medal was stored. I worked on my project for 6 whole weeks. Yes, and that's very nice, Mom said dismissively, but Jackson is being scouted for elite teams, and Sophia might skip a grade. Their activities require more attention at this critical stage. The implication hung heavy, Madison's achievements weren't as valuable. Her activities not as worthy of their time. I felt heat rising in my face, the familiar mixture of hurt and anger that had been my companion at family gatherings for as long as I could remember. Madison's achievements are just as significant. I interjected, keeping my voice steady through sheer force of will. She's reading above grade level. Her teachers consistently praise her critical thinking, and her science project is advancing to the district level. These are accomplishments worth celebrating. My mother sighed dramatically, exchanging a loaded glance with my father. There you go again, Megan. Always so sensitive. We're simply being realistic about the children's different potential. Different potential. I repeated, the words tasting bitter. Well, yes, she continued, apparently oblivious to the dangerous territory she was entering. Bella's children have certain advantages. A two-parent home, financial stability, proper guidance. It's only natural they would excel in ways that... Mum? Bella interrupted, finally seeming to recognize the conversation had veered into unacceptable territory. That's enough. But it wasn't enough for my mother, who had apparently decided this was the moment to air every unspoken judgment she had harbored over the years. I'm simply stating facts, she continued. Single parenthood has consequences. Megan made her choices, and while we've accepted that, it doesn't mean we can pretend those choices don't impact Madison's circumstances. Madison's eyes widened at this direct reference to her family structure, something she was sensitive about, but had never been made to feel was a disadvantage until this moment. My mom is the best mom, she said, her voice small but firm. She helps lots of kids at school and makes sure I do my homework and read books and try new things. The pure defense from my child cracked something in my chest. 8 years old and already having to defend her family, her upbringing, her very worth in this house that should have been a place of unconditional love. My father, perhaps sensing the conversation had ventured into irredeemable territory, attempted an intervention. Let's all enjoy our dessert. Bella, didn't you say the twins have a recital coming up? It was such a transparent attempt to redirect to safe, familiar ground, praising the twins, that I might have laughed if I hadn't been so hurt. Dad, I said quietly, Madison is sitting right here telling you she feels unloved? And your response is to change the subject to Sophia and Jackson. He had the grace to look embarrassed. That's not what I'd Sometimes I wish things had been different. My mother interrupted, addressing no one in particular. Her voice carried a wistful quality that sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. Life would be so much simpler. What does that mean? I asked. Though some part of me already knew what was coming, she looked directly at me, then all pretense was abandoned. If I'm being completely honest, sometimes we wish Bella's kids were our only grandkids. There, I've said it. They fit into our lives, our social circle. They don't come with complications. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Madison, who had been following the adult conversation with growing distress, suddenly understood the full implication. Her grandmother had just stated in clear terms that she wished Madison didn't exist. Her face crumpled instantly, her eyes filling with tears that spilled down her cheeks. Before I could reach for her, she pushed back her chair, with a scrape that seemed to echo through the silent room, and ran from the table. Madison, I called, rising immediately to follow her. Oh, for heaven's sake, my mother said, exasperation replacing any hint of remorse. She's being overly dramatic. Children need to learn that life isn't always. Stop talking, I said, my voice deadly calm despite the rage boiling beneath the surface. You don't get to say another word about my daughter. Even Bella looked shocked. Mom, how could you say that in front of Madison? My mother sniffed. I was simply being honest, something this family could use more of. I stood at the table, looking at each family member in turn. My father, uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge his wife. Bella, horrified but ultimately complicit in years of this treatment. The twins, confused witnesses to adult cruelty they didn't yet understand. And my mother, somehow looking like the injured party despite having just emotionally devastated an 8-year-old child. We're leaving, I announced, my decision already made. And until there's a genuine apology and real change, you won't be seeing Madison again. Don't be ridiculous. My mother scoffed. You're overreacting as usual. Am I? I asked, suddenly exhausted by decades of this dynamic. Would you let anyone else speak to Sophia or Jackson? The way you just spoke about Madison? Without waiting for an answer, I turned to find my daughter. She was in the guest bathroom, sobbing with the kind of full body grief that only children can express, unrestrained by adult composure. Baby, I'm so sorry, I whispered, kneeling beside her. What Grandma said was wrong and cruel and not true at all. Why doesn't she want me? Madison hiccuped between sobs. What's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you, I said fiercely, pulling her into my arms. Not one single thing. The problem is with Grandma and Grandpa, not you. Never you. I helped her wash her face, gathered our belongings, and walked out the front door without another word to my parents. As I buckled Madison into her booster seat, I could see the family watching through the dining room window. Their faces were a tableau of shock, confusion, and from my mother, indignation rather than remorse. The drive home was punctuated by Madison's quiet sniffles. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as I navigated the familiar streets away from my childhood home, knowing with absolute certainty that our relationship with my parents would never be the same again. And for the first time in my life, that realization brought relief rather than pain. By the time we arrived home at our apartment, Madison had cried herself into exhaustion. Her eyes were puffy. Her breathing hitched occasionally with the aftershocks of intense sobbing. I carried her inside, though she was really too big for that now, needing the physical connection as much as she did. Our apartment was modest but cozy. 2 bedrooms in a brick building in Somerville, filled with books and plants and Madison's artwork on every wall. It had always felt like a safe haven, but tonight, I wondered if I had done enough to protect her from the judgment and conditional love of my parents. I helped Madison change into pajamas and sat on the edge of her bed, unsure how to begin addressing what had happened. She saved me from having to find the words. Grandma wishes I wasn't born, she said simply, her voice hoarse from crying. No, sweetheart. I began automatically, then stopped myself. Sugarcoating the truth wouldn't help her process this betrayal. What Grandma said was cruel and wrong. She let her own problems and narrow thinking hurt you, and that is never okay. Madison twisted the edge of her comforter between small fingers. But why? I try to be good. I made her a Mother's Day card, and I always say please and thank you, and I don't interrupt when adults are talking. Not usually. The injustice of her searching for flaws in herself, rather than recognizing the flaws in her grandparents' behavior made my throat tight with emotion. This isn't about you being good enough, I explained carefully. Some adults have fixed ideas about what families should look like, or how people should live. Grandma and Grandpa think there's only one right way to have a family, like Aunt Bella's family. But that's wrong. There are many ways to have a wonderful family. Like just you and me, she asked, vulnerability evident in her voice. Exactly like you and me, I confirmed, brushing hair from her forehead. Our family is perfect exactly as it is. We talked for nearly 2 hours that night, having the kind of deep conversation I hadn't anticipated having with my daughter for many years yet. We discussed how people sometimes confuse love with approval, how sometimes family members can love you, but still behave in hurtful ways, how it's possible to love someone and still need distance from them if they can't treat you with respect. It hurts here, Madison said at one point, pressing a hand to her chest, like something broke inside. I pulled her close. I know, baby. That's called heartbreak, and it's one of the hardest feelings in the world. But I promise you, hearts can heal, and they can get stronger where they were broken. Like when you glue something? Something like that? I smiled sadly. But the glue is made of time and love and learning to believe in yourself, even when others don't see how amazing you are. Finally, Madison drifted off to sleep, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. I sat beside her bed long after her breathing had deepened, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest, replaying the evening's events, and feeling my resolve harden with each passing minute. Once I was certain she was soundly asleep, I retreated to the living room and collapsed on the couch, allowing myself the tears I had been holding back. I cried for my daughter's pain. I cried for my own lifetime of never quite measuring up. I cried for the family relationship I had always hoped for, but now accepted would never exist. When the tears subsided, a strange calm settled over me. The decision I had announced while leaving my parents' house had been instinctive, born of maternal protection. But now I examined it with clear-eyed determination. This wasn't a temporary reaction, it was a necessary boundary that should have been established years ago. My phone had been buzzing throughout the evening. I finally checked it to find multiple texts and missed calls. From Bella, "Call me. Mom's hysterical. Dad says you're being unreasonable." From Dad, "Your mother didn't mean it that way. You know how she gets when she's flustered. Let's not blow this out of proportion." From Mom, "I won't be made the villain for speaking honestly. When you've calmed down, we can discuss this like adults." Not a single message contained a genuine apology or acknowledgement of the harm done to Madison. The familiar pattern of minimizing, deflecting, and turning themselves into the victims was playing out exactly as I had expected. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called my friend Ela, a child psychologist I had met when Madison started school. "They said what?" Ela exclaimed after I recounted the evening's events. In front of Madison. "Megan, that's emotional abuse. Plain and simple." Hearing someone else name it so explicitly validated what my instincts had been screaming. This wasn't normal family tension, or a simple misunderstanding. It was harmful behavior that had been allowed to continue for too long. "What do I do now?" I asked, suddenly overwhelmed by the practical implications of cutting off contact with my parents. They occasionally helped with childcare during school holidays. They contributed to Madison's college fund each year. There were birthdays and holidays and family traditions to consider. "You protect Madison first," Ela said firmly. "Everything else is secondary. And from a psychological perspective, it's crucial that you follow through on the boundary you've set. Children learn about healthy relationships by watching how we handle unhealthy ones." We talked for over an hour, developing a practical plan for the coming weeks. Ila recommended a counselor who specialized in helping children process family rejection. She offered to help with childcare during my upcoming parent-teacher conferences. And she reminded me that a chosen family can be more nurturing than biological connections. Sleep eluded me that night. I researched articles about grandparent estrangement, joined online support groups for parents navigating toxic family relationships, and drafted a detailed email to my parents that I wasn't yet ready to send. By morning, I had dark circles under my eyes, but a clear plan forming in my mind. The next day brought fresh attempts at contact from my family. Bella called while I was making Madison breakfast. "You need to fix this," she said without preamble. "Mom's a mess. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof, and the twins keep asking why Madison left so suddenly. I need to fix this," I repeated incredulously. "Bella, Mom told my 8-year-old daughter to her face that she wishes she didn't exist." "She didn't say it exactly like that," Bella hedged. "You know Mom speaks without thinking sometimes." "That's not what happened. And you know it," I countered. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. This was the culmination of years of treating Madison as less valuable than your children. And you've enabled it every step of the way. The silence that followed told me the truth had landed. "What do you want me to do?" Bella finally asked, her voice smaller. "I want you to stop pretending this is normal family dynamics. I want you to hold Mom and Dad accountable instead of expecting Madison and me to keep absorbing the hurt to maintain family peace. I want you to consider how you'd feel if someone said they wished your children didn't exist." Another long pause. "They'll never change if you just cut them off," she eventually said. "They've never changed despite years of second chances," I pointed out. "And I'm not responsible for changing them. I'm only responsible for protecting Madison." After we hung up, I checked my email to find a message from my father with the subject line, "Let's be reasonable." The body contained no apology, just a lengthy explanation of how my mother had been stressed about her upcoming garden club presentation, how Madison had put her on the spot with an inappropriate question, and how families needed to forgive small transgressions. I closed the email without responding and turned my attention to Madison, who was subdued but seemed determined to proceed with our regular Sunday activities. We worked on her presentation for the district science fair, baked cookies, and watched a movie curled up together on the couch. I observed her carefully for signs of deeper distress, noting how she would occasionally grow quiet and distant, lost in thoughts I wished she never had to have. By that evening, my phone showed 5 more missed calls from my parents and another text from Bella reporting that Mom was now claiming I had twisted her words and always been too sensitive. The narrative was shifting from denial to revisionism, another familiar pattern in our family dynamic. I sent a brief text to both my parents. I need time and space to process what happened and support Madison. I'll contact you when I'm ready to discuss this further. Until then, please respect our boundaries by not reaching out. Then I turned off notifications from their numbers, a small act of self-protection that felt enormously significant. For the first time in my life, I was prioritizing my daughter's emotional well-being and my own peace over the obligation to maintain family harmony at any cost. That night, as Madison slept fitfully in her room, I made a promise to myself and to her this time would be different. This time, the toxic cycle would end with me. By Monday morning, I had moved beyond shock and grief into purposeful action. Madison was reluctant to go to school, afraid her classmates would somehow know about Saturday's humiliation. I assured her that her private family matters would remain private, but I did email her teacher to explain that Madison had experienced a difficult family situation and might need extra support. After dropping Madison off, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. This situation required my full attention and energy. I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, coffee, and determination, crafting a strategic approach to what I now recognized as a necessary family restructuring. First, I researched family therapists specializing in intergenerational trauma and boundary setting. I made an appointment with Dr. Karina Marshall, whose compassionate yet no-nonsense approach resonated with me during our brief phone consultation. What you're describing is unfortunately common, she told me. Grandparent favoritism can cause lasting emotional damage, especially when it's explicitly verbalized to the child. You're right to take this seriously. Next, I drafted the email I had been composing in my head since Saturday night. Unlike my usual communication with my parents, apologetic, careful, designed to minimize conflict, this message was clear and direct. Mom and Dad, I'm writing to address what happened at dinner on Saturday evening. Madison and I will be taking a 3-month break from family gatherings while we work with a counselor to process the hurt caused by Mom's statement that you wish Bella's kids were your only grandkids. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an overreaction. It was the culmination of years of differential treatment that has been evident to everyone, including an 8-year-old child who simply wants her grandparents' love. If you wish to resume a relationship with Madison after this period, I require the following: 1. A genuine apology directly to Madison that acknowledges the specific hurt caused. 2. A commitment to attend at least 3 family counseling sessions with Dr. Marshall, contact information attached. 3. Demonstrated effort to treat Madison with the same enthusiasm and interest you show to Sophia and Jackson. 4. Respect for my parenting decisions without comparative comments to Bella's family. This isn't negotiable, and attempts to minimize what happened will only extend our time apart. Madison deserves grandparents who value her completely, not conditionally. Megan. I read the email 10 times before sending it, checking for any hint of the apologetic tone I typically adopted when standing up to my parents. Finding none, I hit send with a sense of liberation. With that difficult task completed, I turned my attention to building a support system independent of my family of origin. I contacted friends I had somewhat neglected while trying to maintain family obligations. Sarah, my college roommate now living in Cambridge, immediately offered to host us for Thanksgiving if we needed alternative holiday plans. Marcus and David, a couple from Madison's school whose daughter was in her class, suggested regular Sunday dinners to establish a new weekend tradition. By noon, my phone was predictably buzzing with reactions to my email. I ignored it, focusing instead on practical matters. I updated Madison's school records to remove my parents from the approved pickup list. An unlikely scenario, but I wasn't taking chances. I canceled the joint family membership to the Science Museum that my parents had purchased, buying our own instead. When Madison returned from school, I had a simplified, age-appropriate version of our plan ready to share. We're going to take a break from seeing Grandma and Grandpa for a while, I explained as we walked to her favorite park. During that time, we're going to talk with a nice doctor who helps families figure out their feelings. Madison kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk. Forever? No, not forever. I assured her. For about 3 months, which is 12 weekends. During that time, Grandma and Grandpa need to think about how they've made you feel and learn better ways to be good grandparents. What if they don't want to learn? Madison asked, her insight piercing my heart. Then we'll still be okay, I said firmly. Because we have each other, and we're starting to build our own special family with people who know exactly how amazing you are. She considered this, her face serious. Like Miss Sarah and Uncle Louis. She asked, referring to my close friends who had been consistent presences in her life. Exactly like them. Some people call that a cousin family. People who aren't related to us by blood, but who love us completely, just as we are. This concept seemed to comfort Madison. As we reached the park, her steps lightened slightly. That evening, I finally checked my messages. My mother had responded to my email with a lengthy rebuttal, denying she had said what multiple people had clearly heard. My father had called 3 times, leaving increasingly stern voicemails about tearing the family apart. Bella had texted, expressing concern that this feud would affect the twins' relationship with their cousin. Not one message contained an acknowledgement of Madison's feelings or the harm done. I wasn't surprised, but the confirmation of their inability to take responsibility strengthened my resolve. I responded only to Bella, suggesting that she could bring the twins to meet Madison at neutral locations like the park or library, if she wanted to maintain their relationship. During our time apart from our parents, the next day brought an unexpected ally. My father's sister, Aunt Judith, called after apparently hearing a distorted version of events from my mother. Your mother claims you've forbidden them from seeing Madison over a simple misunderstanding, she began cautiously. I took a deep breath and shared the unvarnished truth, including the exact words my mother had spoken. Oh, Megan. Aunt Judith sighed. I wish I could say I'm surprised. Your mother said almost the same thing to me when my Darren was born with Down syndrome. She told me it was such a shame, and that some children are just burdens. This revelation stunned me. I had always wondered why Aunt Judith maintained minimal contact with my parents despite living less than an hour away. Now I understood. She had been protecting her son from the same conditional acceptance that had wounded Madison. You're doing the right thing, she assured me. I wish I'd been as brave when Darren was young. The years I spent trying to win their approval only taught him that he needed to earn love. It took therapy for both of us to unlearn that lesson. By the end of the week, I had implemented most of my action plan. Madison had her first appointment scheduled with the child psychologist. I had found a parent support group for those dealing with family estrangement. We had created a calendar of fun activities to fill the weekends, usually spent at my parents' house. I had even enrolled us both in a pottery class, something Madison had been requesting for months, but I had never found time for between family obligations. The most unexpected development came on Sunday, exactly 1 week after the fateful dinner. My phone rang with a call from Thomas, Bella's husband, who rarely initiated contact with me. I want you to know I support what you're doing, he said without preamble. What your mother said was unconscionable, and Bella knows it too, though she's caught in the middle. Thank you, I said, genuinely surprised by his solidarity. That means a lot. Bella doesn't know I'm calling, he continued. But I've told her, I won't be attending any family functions until your parents make this right. The twins have asked about Madison every day. They miss her. This unexpected alliance brought tears to my eyes. Perhaps the ripple effects of standing firm would extend beyond just protecting Madison. Perhaps they might even catalyze change in the family system I had long accepted as unchangeable. 3 weeks into our new routine, I noticed subtle but significant changes in Madison. Without the regular reminders of her perceived inadequacy in her grandparents' eyes, she seemed more confident. She spoke up more in class, according to her teacher. She approached her district science fair presentation with determination rather than anxiety about whether it would finally be good enough for Grandma and Grandpa to notice. Our apartment felt different, too. Lighter, somehow, as though the constant weight of unmet expectations had been a physical presence we had grown accustomed to carrying. We laughed more easily. Our conversations flowed, without the undercurrent of comparison to Bella's family that had often infiltrated our daily life. One night, as I tucked Madison in, she asked the question I had been waiting for. "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa miss us?" I considered my answer carefully. I think they miss the idea of having a complete family gathering. But I'm not sure they understand yet what they've been missing about you. How thoughtful you are. How you notice everything. How you care so deeply about plants and animals and stories. Madison nodded, processing this distinction. I miss the good parts, she admitted. Like Grandpa's pancakes and the trees swing in their yard. But I don't miss feeling like I'm not good enough. You have always been more than good enough, I told her fiercely. Then now we're making sure everyone in your life knows that, too. Exactly 3 days after I sent the email establishing our boundaries, the first cracks appeared in my parents' perfectly constructed world. My cousin Jamie called to ask why my mother had been crying at their weekly bridge club. Aunt Carol said something about you keeping Madison from them. Jamie inquired cautiously. She was pretty upset, saying you were punishing them unfairly. I hadn't intended to share our situation widely, but I refused to let my mother control the narrative. I gave Jamie a straightforward account of what had happened, including my mother's exact words to Madison. "Well," Jamie stammered. "I had no idea things were like that. Mom always said your parents doted on all their grandkids." "They dote on Sophia and Jackson," I corrected gently. "Madison has always been an afterthought." This conversation repeated itself over the following weeks as various family members and family friends reached out, having heard my mother's version of events. With each retelling, I remained factual and calm, neither embellishing nor minimizing what had happened. The reactions ranged from shocked support to uncomfortable attempts to mediate. My father's brother, Uncle Robert, called to tell me I was destroying my parents, standing in the community, and needed to get over it, for the sake of family harmony. I thanked him for his concern but held firm. "This isn't about community standing," I explained. "It's about my daughter hearing from her grandmother that she wishes Madison didn't exist." "Carol would never say that," he insisted. "You must have misunderstood. There were 6 people at that table, Uncle Robert. We all heard the same thing." His silence spoke volumes. The family mythology of my parents, as perfect grandparents, was colliding with undeniable reality. A week later, Bella called with news that our parents' anniversary party, the elaborate celebration they had been planning for months, had been quietly cancelled. 3 couples backed out after hearing what happened, she reported, sounding troubled. "Mom's devastated. She says people are taking sides without hearing her version." "What is her version, exactly?" I asked, genuinely curious how my mother was recounting the incident. Bella hesitated. "She's saying Madison asked a leading question that put her on the spot, and that she simply meant she wishes all her grandchildren lived closer, like the twins do." The transparent attempt to rewrite history might have worked if there hadn't been witnesses. "That's not what happened, Bella. You were there. You heard exactly what she said, and in what context." Another pause. "I know," she finally admitted. "I told her she needs to stop denying it, and start making amends if she wants things to go back to normal." This small acknowledgement from Bella felt like a significant shift in our family's typical dynamics. For years, she had tacitly supported our parents' favoritism by accepting the extra attention for her children without question. Now, she seemed to be recognizing her own role in the dysfunctional system. Meanwhile, Madison was flourishing in ways that surprised even me. Her teacher reported that she had volunteered to lead a group project, something she had always been too shy to do before. At her weekly sessions with Dr. Torres, the child psychologist, she was developing language to express her feelings about family relationships and learning that her worth wasn't determined by her grandparents' approval. "Madison has remarkable emotional intelligence," Dr. Torres told me during our parent consultation. She's processing this situation in impressively healthy ways. Your openness with her about what happened, without demonizing your parents, has given her permission to have her own complex feelings. The ripple effects continued to spread through our extended family system. My parents had always hosted major holidays, positioning themselves as the family patriarchs who determined the guest list and seating arrangements. With Thanksgiving approaching, alternative plans began emerging. Aunt Judith invited us to join her family, including her son Darren, whom I had rarely been allowed to spend time with growing up. My cousin, Emma, decided to host her own dinner and pointedly invited us, while noting my parents had declined when they learned we would be attending. The family was reorganizing itself around the boundary I had established, with some members choosing sides and others creating new traditions altogether. It was both unsettling and liberating to realize how much power my parents had wielded over our extended family gatherings, simply because no one had previously challenged their authority. 4 weeks after the incident, I received a large package delivered to our apartment. Inside was an expensive electronic tablet, the exact model the twins had received for their birthday that had prompted Madison's first questions about unequal treatment. There was a card from my mother with a message that read, "For our special granddaughter, love Grandma and Grandpa." No apology, no acknowledgement of the hurt caused, just an expensive gift that appeared to be an attempt to buy her way back into Madison's life without doing any of the emotional work I had outlined in my email. I set the package aside, uncertain how to handle it. That evening, I explained the situation to Madison in age-appropriate terms. "Grandma and Grandpa sent you a present," I told her. "But remember how we talked about them needing to learn better ways to show love, not just giving gifts when they've hurt your feelings?" Madison considered this thoughtfully. "Did they say sorry?" "No, they didn't." "Then I don't want the tablet," she said firmly. "It's like when Zoe pushes someone at recess and gives them her dessert instead of saying sorry. The teacher says that's not really fixing anything." Her wisdom brought tears to my eyes. "You're exactly right. I'm going to send it back to them with a note explaining why." The returned gift prompted the first direct communication from my father in weeks. An angry voicemail demanding to know what kind of mother refuses to let her child accept a peace offering from her grandparents. I didn't respond, maintaining the boundary I had established. 6 weeks into our separation, news came through family channels that my father had experienced chest pains and been briefly hospitalized. Tests showed it wasn't a heart attack, but stress-related angina. My mother made sure everyone knew this health crisis was directly caused by the unnecessary strain of being cut off from Madison. The implicit guilt trip was expertly crafted, and for a moment, I felt the familiar pull of obligation and doubt. Was I being too harsh? Was the estrangement causing more harm than good? I brought these concerns to my next session with Dr. Marshall. "Your father's health is his responsibility, not yours," she reminded me gently. "And medical science doesn't support the notion that relationship boundaries cause cardiac issues. More importantly, consider the message it would send to Madison if you abandoned your boundary because of this implied guilt." She was right. Capitulating now would teach Madison that her emotional health was less important than maintaining a facade of family harmony. It would reinforce the very dynamic I was working to change. That her needs came last in the family hierarchy. 2 months into our estrangement, an unexpected revelation emerged during a rare lunch with Bella. She had been increasingly supportive in recent weeks, bringing the twins to meet Madison at parks and museums, while respecting our boundary with our parents. "I need to tell you something," she said hesitantly after we had ordered. "Mom and Dad have been paying our mortgage for the past 3 years." This disclosure stunned me. Bella and Thomas both had well-paying jobs, and they had always presented their beautiful home as the result of their own hard work and financial discipline. "Why?" I managed to ask. Thomas's firm downsized during the recession. He was out of work for 8 months, and we nearly lost the house. Mom and Dad stepped in, but they didn't want anyone to know. They said it would embarrass Thomas. The implications were staggering. While I had struggled to make ends meet as a single mother on a teacher's salary, receiving only minimal help from my parents, they had been secretly supporting Bella's family, to maintain the appearance of her perfect life. They've spent over 200,000 keeping up our lifestyle. Bella continued, shame evident in her voice, all while making comments about your budgeting and apartment size. I should have said something years ago. I'm sorry, Megan. This confession explained so much: the extravagant gifts for the twins, the lavish family vacations, my parents' deep investment in presenting Bella's family as the ideal. They had literally bought the perfect family image they wanted to project. Is that why you've always defended them? I asked quietly. Bella nodded, tears forming. I felt trapped, obligated. But seeing what happened with Madison, it forced me to realize how dysfunctional this whole system is. I told Thomas we need to refinance and start paying our own way, even if it means downsizing. This conversation marked a turning point in my relationship with my sister. For the first time, she was acknowledging her complicity in the family dynamic that had caused Madison and me so much pain. More importantly, she was taking steps to extricate herself from the unhealthy pattern. As we approached the 3-month mark I had established in my email, signs of a fracture in my parents' unified front began to emerge. My father called one evening after Madison was asleep. Your mother doesn't know I'm calling, he began awkwardly. But I've been thinking about what you said in your email, about Madison deserving grandparents who value her completely, not conditionally. I remained silent, waiting. I've loved that little girl from the day she was born, he continued, his voice uncharacteristically emotional. But I let your mother set the tone for our relationship with her, just like I've done with everything else for 40 years. It was the first hint of self-awareness I had ever heard from my father. The thing is, he went on, I miss Madison, not just family gatherings or my role as a grandfather. I miss her, specifically. Her questions about how things work, the way she notices cloud patterns, how she always remembers what kind of cookies I like. She misses you, too, I acknowledged, feeling the first genuine softening in my resolve. But she doesn't miss feeling like she's not good enough. I understand that now, he said quietly. And I want to do those counseling sessions you mentioned, with or without your mother. Can you send me the information again? That night, I allowed myself to feel cautious hope that perhaps meaningful change was possible, at least with my father. My mother remained entrenched in her position, but cracks were appearing in the family structure that had seemed so unchangeable just 3 months earlier. Most importantly, Madison was thriving. The dark circles that had appeared under her eyes after years of subtle rejection had faded. Her natural curiosity and enthusiasm, sometimes dampened by her grandparents' indifference, had re-emerged in full force. She spoke more confidently, laughed more freely, and no longer measured her achievements against her cousin's accomplishments. 3 days before the 3-month mark, an unexpected email arrived from my mother. Unlike her previous communications, this one was brief and direct. I've been seeing Dr. Levinson weekly since October. She's helped me see patterns I was blind to before. I'm not ready for the family counseling yet, but I'm working toward it. The tablet was a mistake. I'm sorry for what I said to Madison. I'd like a chance to apologize to her directly when you think she's ready. It wasn't the full acknowledgement I had hoped for, but it was the first genuine step in that direction. More importantly, it suggested my mother was doing her own work rather than expecting Madison and me to simply forget and move on. I showed the email to Dr. Marshall during our next session. This is actually quite significant, she noted. Your mother is acknowledging specific wrongdoing rather than making vague apologies. She's respecting your timeline rather than demanding immediate access to Madison. And she's demonstrating effort through her own therapy. So you think it's a genuine change? I asked cautiously. It's a beginning, she replied. Real change takes time, especially with entrenched patterns. But this indicates a willingness that wasn't present before. As the 3-month mark arrived, our family looked remarkably different than it had on that fateful evening at my parents' dining table. Relationships had shifted, alliances had reformed, and the carefully maintained facade of family perfection had cracked to reveal the complex truth beneath. Most importantly, Madison understood with absolute certainty that her worth was not determined by her grandparents' approval. Whatever happened next in our family's journey, That lesson alone made every difficult moment of the past 3 months worthwhile. 6 months after that devastating dinner, Madison and I stood on my parents' front porch, her small hand gripping mine tightly. This would be our first visit since establishing the boundary, a carefully negotiated reunion with specific parameters agreed upon in advance. "Remember what we talked about?" I said softly, kneeling to meet her eyes. "You don't have to hug anyone if you don't want to. You can take breaks whenever you need them. And we can leave at any time if you feel uncomfortable." Madison nodded solemnly. At 8.5 now, she seemed older somehow, with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. "I remember," she assured me. "And I have my feelings card in my pocket if I need it." The feelings card had been Dr. Torres's suggestion, a small index card with simple phrases Madison could point to if she became overwhelmed. "I need a break. I feel uncomfortable. I want to talk about this later." It gave her a tool to express boundaries without having to find words in potentially emotional moments. Before I could ring the doorbell, the door opened to reveal my father. His appearance shocked me slightly. He had lost weight, and his previously dark hair showed significant gray that hadn't been there 6 months ago. "Megan." "Madison." His voice held none of the authoritative tone I had grown up with. "Thank you for coming." We entered the familiar house, now feeling like neutral territory rather than the site of so many childhood disappointments. The living room had been rearranged. The formal furniture that had always made relaxation impossible was replaced by more comfortable, casual pieces. A bookshelf now held framed photos of Madison at various ages, photos I hadn't even realized my parents possessed. My mother emerged from the kitchen, visibly nervous. Another unprecedented sight. In all my life, I had never seen Carol Bennett anything less than perfectly composed. "Hello," she said simply. "I've made lemonade and those oatmeal cookies Madison likes, if that's all right." The tentative request for approval, rather than the assumption of control, represented a seismic shift in my mother's approach. We settled in the living room, the conversation initially stilted and careful. Madison sat close to my side, observing everything with quiet intensity. After some general questions about school and activities, my mother took a deep breath. "Madison, I owe you an apology," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "The words I said at dinner 6 months ago were deeply hurtful and completely untrue. I was wrong to say them, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused you." Madison listened attentively, her expression serious. "I want you to know," my mother continued, "that you are an important and valued member of this family. I'm working with a doctor to understand why I sometimes have difficulty showing love in healthy ways. That's my problem, not yours. You have never been anything less than a wonderful granddaughter." It was the apology I had insisted upon, specific, without excuses, acknowledging the hurt caused and taking full responsibility. I felt Madison relax slightly beside me. "Thank you for saying sorry." Madison responded with simple dignity. "That helps." My father then spoke directly to Madison, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "I also need to apologize, not just for what was said that night, but for all the times I didn't speak up when you weren't being treated fairly. A grandfather's job is to protect his grandchildren, and I failed to do that." The visit lasted exactly the 2 hours we had agreed upon in advance. There were awkward moments and periods of silence, but also glimpses of genuine connection. My father showing Madison the birdhouse he had built during our time apart, my mother listening attentively to Madison's detailed explanation of her latest science project, without a single comparison to her cousin's activities. As we prepared to leave, my mother handed Madison a small wrapped package. "This isn't a bribe," she clarified quickly. "It's something I thought you might enjoy. You don't need to open it now." In the car, Madison carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a journal with planets on the cover, and a set of colored pens. Inside the front cover, my mother had written, "For recording your observations of the world. You notice things others miss." It was perhaps the first gift that reflected actual knowledge of who Madison was as a person rather than a generic offering or a duplicate of something the twins had received. "I like it," Madison decided after careful consideration. "It's just for me." That first visit established the template for our gradually rebuilding relationship. weekly video calls with specific time limits, monthly in-person visits that always included an activity Madison enjoyed. My parents attended the counseling sessions I had requested, sometimes together and sometimes separately. Progress wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns emerged, and had to be addressed directly. There were difficult conversations about years of favoritism that my parents initially struggled to acknowledge. But with each honest exchange, the foundation for a healthier relationship strengthened. The wider family landscape continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Bella and Thomas did indeed refinance their home and begin living within their actual means, resulting in a more authentic relationship between our families. The twins, freed from their role as the perfect grandchildren, developed a closer bond with Madison based on genuine connection rather than comparison. Aunt Judith became a regular presence in our lives, and through her, Madison developed a loving relationship with my cousin Darren, whose gentle spirit and different abilities gave her a valuable perspective on what truly constitutes human worth. Most significantly, the facade of family perfection that had been maintained for decades at the expense of genuine connection began to crumble, replaced by something messier but infinitely more authentic. 1 year after the breaking point, Madison and I sat together on our apartment balcony, tending to the container garden we had started during our time apart from my parents. Her science fair project on plant growth had blossomed into a genuine passion for gardening. "Mum," she said thoughtfully as she carefully watered a tomato plant. "Remember when Grandma said that thing about wishing I wasn't their grandkid?" My heart still contracted at the memory. "I do. I'm kinda glad it happened," she said, surprising me completely. "You are?" Madison nodded, her face serious. "Before, everyone pretended everything was okay when it wasn't. Now, people say what they really mean. It's better." Her insight struck me profoundly. In trying to maintain family peace at all costs, I had participated in a system of pretense that taught my daughter to doubt her own perceptions. The painful rupture had cleared the way for something more honest to emerge. "You're right," I agreed. "Sometimes things need to break apart before they can be rebuilt in a better way. Like when you repot a plant because its roots are all crowded," Madison suggested, demonstrating a wisdom that continued to amaze me. Exactly like that. As I reflect on our journey, I realize that the most valuable lesson wasn't about family obligation or even setting boundaries, though those were important. The true gift was learning that relationships built on conditional acceptance and comparison can never nurture authentic growth. Not for children, and not for adults either. By refusing to participate any longer in the damaging family dynamics that had shaped my own childhood, I gave Madison permission to expect better from her grandparents, from other relationships, and then eventually, from herself. I showed her that love should never require diminishing yourself to make others comfortable. My relationship with my parents continues to evolve. Some days are easier than others. The damage of decades cannot be undone in months, and there are moments when old habits resurface. But the fundamental power dynamic has shifted permanently. They no longer dictate the terms of our relationship, we co-create it, with mutual respect as the foundation. Madison sees her grandparents approximately once a month now. These visits are generally positive, marked by a growing understanding on my parents' part of who their granddaughter actually is rather than who they wished she would be. My mother still struggles sometimes, but she now recognizes when she's slipping into comparative behavior and usually catches herself. Most importantly, Madison now approaches these relationships with healthy expectations and strong boundaries of her own. She understands that her grandparents' capacity for connection is limited by their own histories and challenges. She can enjoy the relationship for what it is while no longer internalizing its limitations as reflections of her worth. As for me, I have learned that protecting my child sometimes requires a courage I didn't know I possessed. That family harmony achieved through silence and accommodation isn't harmony at all but suppression. That sometimes the most loving thing we can do for those we care about is to hold them accountable for harmful behavior, even when that accountability is initially painful for everyone involved. The words my mother spoke that night at the dinner table were cruel and damaging. But in their terrible clarity, They created an opportunity for a truth that might otherwise have remained buried beneath years of polite pretense. Sometimes it takes a moment of complete brokenness to finally begin healing properly. What would you do if someone said something deeply hurtful about your child? Would you have the courage to establish firm boundaries, even with family members? Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult but important family experiences. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for your child is simply to stand firmly beside them, even when it means standing against everyone else.